Hello everyone, I'm Samantha, and today I'm going to share with you 3 basic bowspring poses, and I'm going to tell you why they're important, and I'm going to show you how to do it very specifically. So the 3 poses we're going to learn today are great because they are available for the very, very beginner. The 3 poses are earth pose, which is just regular standing, all fours pose, which is a hands and knees position, and side bow, which is lying on the side. The reason these poses are so important to learn is because they're the simplest variations of the bowspring posture, which in the beginning feels pretty foreign. The second reason why it's important to learn this is because all other bowspring poses increase in complexity from here. If you know these 3 poses, you're on your way to learning the other ones very well. And the third reason why learning these poses is so important is because when you learn this, you learn the bowspring algorithm, you can have less pain in your life, you can have more flexibility and movement to do the things you want to do, and an overall increase in vitality. The bowspring formula feels a little foreign to people at first, but believe me, it is innately mammalian. And as you keep trying, you'll be able to feel your animal nature and movement instinct start to come out naturally. So first, we'll start in the basic standing pose, earth pose. I will describe 3 areas of the body that are like spears. The rib cage is the most important, the hips, and the head. So we'll think about these spheres as getting bigger and broader all the way around. They're buoyant and they're light. So starting with the rib cage, we call this expanded rib cage radiant heart. You can breathe big into your ribs and start stretching the fascia between your ribs so the ribs start to open up. Even the side ribs, the low ribs, and a place that's tricky to do in the beginning, which is the back ribs between the shoulder blades. The shoulder blades will clear the back. They come off the back instead of on it. We take them off of the back and we have more space to expand the rib cage all the way around. We even want it expanding in the front at the same time. So that's radiant heart. It expands and it lifts and it gets big. The hips is the next thing I'm going to talk about. The hips are going to be tilted forward. It's a forward pelvic tilt. The pubic bone points down and the tailbone will point up. And the head is going to lift up and rise like it's stretching away from the ribs and floating on up like a helium balloon. The head, the heart, and the hips, all big, broad, getting light and buoyant. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the legs. So we're going to think about our toes here. The toes are going to touch the floor. The toes are down, and our body weight is more in the front part of our foot, the paw of the foot, if you would, which is the ball and the toes. The heels are actually pretty light. Take a bend, a micro bend to the back of the knee. That's called a hollow. We'll keep that so it can be bouncy. The opposite of that is a locked knee. The bones press back. When I locked my knees, I went into my heels, and there's not a lot of room for mobility when I do that. So find your knee bend, toes down, body weight in the front part of the feet. You can feel a little dancy a little bit when you do that. And next, I'll talk about the arms. So the arms and the shoulders can be a little tricky for people because so many people have their shoulders V'ing down. The trapezoid muscle gets really tight, and some people it's so tight that there's a V shape and it's rock hard. So we're going to lift up the shoulders, not by using the trap muscles, but by lifting from underneath. You can think of it as somebody lifting your arm up and pulling it away. So I'm doing it to myself right now. You can have a friend do it to you to help. So to do this, I lift from underneath the armpit, and when I do this, the trap is soft. It It may take some time to figure this one out, and I encourage you to experiment in a mirror and use some friends to help you out. So the hands will make a seed hand, which is a soft fist. We squeeze the base of the palm and draw the pinky and thumb mounds together, and then the fingers will curl each joint softly. We're not squeezing the fingers hard, they're soft here. The palms are firm. And we do the seed hand so we can wrap a tone up the whole arm, even the back of the arm. When we've got to tone up the whole arm, then we can lift the shoulders. When we can lift the shoulders, we can lift the rib cage. When we can lift the rib cage, we feel a lightness. All right, another thing about the arms is the elbows are going to point outward. So the tendency in some people is to have them this way, but point them outward and make the palms point back. All right? The arms are a little bit forward of their body. They're not up high, and they're not next to the body. They're a little bit forward. That gives us more advantage to get a big, radiant rib cage from behind. So I know I've just given you a lot of information. Let's go through the algorithm again in standing earth pose. So don't get upset if you forget one thing. You have to constantly scan the body. I do myself all the time. So find radiant rib cage, it's floaty. Now, tilt the pelvis, bring the body weight to the front part of the feet. Test your buoyancy with a little spring. Knees are bent, hips back, and then squeeze a tone up your arm. Let the shoulders smile. See how my shoulders are smiling now? That's the opposite of frowning shoulders. And we definitely don't want tight shoulders. We want broad, smiling shoulders. And nothing should be really squeezing tight. That's a common misalignment in Bowspring. There is supposed to be a constant and subtle tone around the bone that is equal everywhere at the same time. So let's try it. Standing earth pose. All right, and we'll refine a little bit here. Lift the palate or the roof of your mouth away from your throat. Separate your back teeth. And finally, take your eyes to the level of the horizon. Eyes at the level of the horizon see a lot. Now soften through your core, from the crown of the head to exit out the pelvic floor. Nothing's gripping. We're hugging the bone with a little bit of tone. Earth pose. Nice. Let's move on. Like I said earlier, I will not be, or I didn't say this earlier, but I meant to say this earlier. As a side note, I will not be teaching transitions today. Transitions in the Bowspring algorithm are just as important as the poses, but I'll save that for a different video. In the meantime, you can watch and observe what I do in between the three poses. The next pose we will learn is all fours pose. So all fours, also in modern postural yoga, is called tabletop, but this is going to be a little bit different. So start with success. So we don't want our hands directly under our shoulders. I have them a little bit forward. And the knees are not real far back either. So I've got good room on here. And a common misalignment, people try to bring their hands too close together. But most of us are just plain small. So if you're broad-shouldered, your pinkies might reach the edges of your mat. So I'm pretty broad-shouldered. My pinkies are almost there. And I'm going to think about the rib cage first. So radiant heart, radiant ribs. And I'm going to think about them expanding, breathing breath into them, stretching the ribs away from one another, and even pushing the back heart, the place between the shoulder blades, towards the ceiling. So the whole radiant ribs is light and lifted. When I did this, you see my shoulder blade is right here. That's the opposite of a sunken heart or maybe a regular tabletop position. where the rib cage falls down. Can you see the difference? So instead of rib cage down, shoulder blades together, I get an advantage of lightness when the ribs move up. I can get nice and broad there. Radiant ribs are big. Don't forget, there's ribs that go all the way down here, and we want them to rise as well. So the hips do the same thing. The pelvic tilt happens. Now, a lot of times when people tilt the pelvis, they go too far and lose the low back ribs. See what just happened there? So what you want to do is maintain the full rib cage and then tilt the pelvis. It's kind of a tug of war. All right, let's think about what our legs are doing here. So I can start by having my ankles flat on the floor and then pressing the tops of the feet into the floor so firmly that I lift them up halfway. We call that hero foot. I've got a digging action on the top of my foot and a space between my ankles that empowers the backs of my legs. Now I'm going to push my heels lightly towards each other and at the same time push my knees energetically away from each other. Whoop. Okay, what happened in my body when I did that was the backs of my legs engaged and my glutes mounted upward, which is what we want to do. We're creating an upward mount of the glutes so we can have more mechanical advantage in our everyday movements. It's not something we're used to doing either. Okay, so I'll maintain what I got going on in the hips and the legs, radiant heart, and let's take a look at the hands. So my hands are in spring hands, and I'll turn around so you can see. So there is about 1 finger distance between each digit, including the thumb. Okay? They're not spread wide, and they're not closed fingers either. 1 finger digit. And I'm not pancaking the hand either. You want to think about your palms as having a spring underneath them, a hollow space, right about here. So think about muscling the pinky mound and the thumb mound together to creating a hollow spot here. If you put your hand in chalk, this part wouldn't get chalk on it, nor would the necks of the fingers. The tips of the fingers would though. So the palms are not pancakes, but they're springs, and you can test it by pumping your spring. There. If they're pancakes, they don't have a lot of movement. This is the bowspring, right? So find a springiness in your fingers. When we have a springiness in the fingers, we have the advantage that we can turn on the myofascial chain in the whole arm, the back of the arm and the front of the arm. And we want to turn the elbows outwards to prevent from locking it. Another common misalignment that I see all the time, especially in women, is the elbows roll forward and they disengage, they come out of socket. So instead, and when they're out of socket like this, it's hard to find a uniform tone. It's almost impossible, so we'll put ourselves at a better advantage. Elbows turn to the side, and then you can see the tone started coming. All right. So coming back to where we were, checking our place on the mat, radiant ribs, engage the roots, so the feet press into the floor, the knees press away from each other, the glutes mount up, you can touch it, glute check. Ribs are full, even the low ribs, we didn't collapse. The ribs are full all the way around, and then our palms are squeezing the base palms, they're springy, elbows point outward, and we've got this animal-like vitality. Okay, the last thing to think about is the head. So another common misalignment, people drop their head here, or they pick it up too much and they shorten the back of their neck. Notice my voice changed when I did that. I have essentially crimped the tube. So I want to keep it long. And if you don't know if it's long or not, you can put your hand on the back of the neck and check. And we want the back of the head pressing up. All fours pose, and you can find a engaged pulse here. Nothing is rigid or hard, but everything's just got the sweet spot of engagement, alignment, and lightness. Wonderful. All right. Next up is side bow. Now we will transition to the side. come down and lay on your side and bring your right arm or your floor arm forward so it's at a diagonal forward. I've still got the seed hand going on, and I'm putting some pressure with this right arm into the floor. It's not just laying there. That wouldn't help much. Seed hand presses into the floor, and stack yourself up in a way so that you have that inward curve of the low back. The tailbone lifts and the butt is behind you. Stack your legs and square your legs at 90 degrees. Keep your ankles flexed. Now, find that big rib cage radiant heart. Let's think about what's happening in our legs here. We've got our ankles flexed, and you can pretend like you're drawing your heels back into something. That's going to help you turn on the backs of your legs. Let your left neck be long. It might try to fight you and get hard here. Go ahead and palpate it, and then encourage its release. You can put your hand on the side of your head and press down to make it lengthen. It feels really good. Open your throat so the back of your head comes more towards the back and touch the back of your neck. You want it to be an inward curve. Take your top hand and make it into a dome hand in front of you. So a dome hand has the fingernails touching the floor, and there is a hollow place in the palm of the hand where maybe a golf ball could fit. So fingernails touch, and we're having the dome hand about the nipple line. Turn the elbow towards the ceiling. Now watch here, are you falling over? So a tendency here is to collapse the ribs forward, or maybe not be balanced and start to roll back. Try to get as tall as you can from the side. Dome hand, open throat, booty back, legs tone, arms tone. Good. All right, now we're going to slide the shoulder blade towards the ear. This is kind of a weird feeling. Keep your fingernails where you are, and then slide the shoulder blade towards the ear. What we're doing is exposing more of the left side ribs towards the ceiling and stretching out the side body. I'll show it to you again. Look what happens to my ribs when I slide the shoulder blade up. So they start to bow and they get bigger. That's what we want, big, radiant heart, nice. Now lift your right waistline off the floor. There's a good space that a cat could crawl under your waistline. Nice, nice, side bow, it's toned, it feels a little weird. Good. Take the left hand to the back of the head like a headrest, and then pressure the back of the head. Keep the left elbow pointed towards the floor, and then push your head back into the hand. Hover the top leg, and pretend like you're holding onto something with the backs of your legs. Now, open your belly by pushing into your right hand and pressuring into the floor for resistance. That's side bow. It's super intense. I'll show it to you on the other side. So it seems like it should be easy, but this pose where we're laying on our side is no joke. Pressure the left hand into the floor, the seed hand, and set up your hips. The tailbone is lifted. There's a curve inward of the low back. And then you want the radiant heart to be nice and full. Bring your right hand to a dome hand in front of you. Let the elbow be towards the ceiling. And then slide the right shoulder towards the ear to allow the right ribs to dome towards the ceiling. Lift your left waistline off the floor. Good. Sit your hips back. Hover the top leg. And you can act like you're grabbing onto something with the back of your heels. More expansion, big ribs, uniform tone. Bring the right hand to the back of the head. And then gently press the head back into the hand to help you bow even more. Find a little pulse here. Nice. And then come to seated. Thank you for watching today. These three basic bowspring moves we've covered today, earth pose, all fours pose, and side bow, are the basic ingredients to a bowspring practice. If you get these three right, then you're on your way to feeling more liquid and fluid in all of your movements. If you have any questions about this video or you want to know if you're doing it right, send me a message or drop a comment in the boxes below. I would love to hear from you and learn about what you think about this video. Thank you. Namaste.